I got this old drill press, probably a 1980s. It's an induction motor, voltage 240, revs per minute up to 1500, and I thought, yeah, I could use that. I know I've got to do a lot of work to get it back to scratch. A lot of rust and parts are missing, especially down here. That should be a crank handle. It turns, but nothing happens, so I've got to get that operational. So I better start by making myself a crank handle. Well, here's an offcut, because that there looks like it's definitely wide enough to take the crank handle part that's still operational. So yeah, that's what my basics will be. This crank handle base has been shaped going from this squared edges. This is offcut, this is offcut, and I just thought that that was ugly. So I decided that first of all I would use these things, these rasps, like this rasp because it's got a curve, and although it's old, it's sharp. And this one is really sharp, I love that. And this one's got a file on one side and the rasp there. So I shaped it, taking off all of the corners. So you can see here, I got rid of that entire corner. Going this way, going that way, and then over and around. Once I had got rid of all of those sharp edges, I then took it to my belt sander, and I can actually use the back of my belt sander, which is somewhat sloppy, but it helps because then I just rub this on the sloppy part of the belt sander belt, and that gives me nice round edges. So I've retained that nice sharp line for a bit of design, and I also want to retain this to remind me where this piece of leftover timber came from. So nothing here is thought new, it's all scrap from something or other else. When I saw that bit of pipe, I thought it was copper until I cleaned it, and lo and behold, it's beautiful brass. So now I've gone from the rasps to very heavy Norton P40, and then I've gone up to this sandpaper. It's a good cutting one, this one, 150. Then I've gone up to the glass paper 180, and then I've gone to my block, which is 350. It's seen better days, but it's still doing the job. So that's where this is at now. That's had the 350, and I'm going to go on and do wet and dry. That's a 600. This is Gator. I love it, made in Canada, good stuff. And after I've done the 600, then I'm going to use my micromesh pads, and of course they go from, the rust colour is 1500. That's a lot of grit. I don't know that I'll want to go any further than maybe teal, which is 4000. So they are the varying pads. I'll wet them before I use them. That's another good one, that P100, that Indasa. I haven't used that today. I wanted to use the Made in China 150. So that's where to make the hand crank rotate, I'm using this screw, which has a cap top. That means I'll have a square section in the hole. That'll stop it rotating, and that will go inside this piece of brass that I had lying around. Now, because there's too much play with this, I've made a leather sleeve for it. So these are all the parts. Let's just see how it all comes together. To accommodate the part that is on the drill press, I've used my mortiser and I've gone down 3/4 of the depth. I've made it on an angle where there is an angle on the actual part but still there. I didn't know how much clearance I'd need so that this part of the handle doesn't hit the table on the drill press. So what I've done is I've kept the depth there and I've narrowed this down, and I'm giving it a bit of a shape by cutting that on an angle. So that's the offcut, and now here we have it taking shape. So that's the part that accommodates the cap screw, square at the top, round for the rest. So let's just see how that cap screw locks. If it turns out that I don't like the length of this brass one, or maybe it's too thin to hang on to, then I can always take this piece of dowel, drill a hole through there, use this smaller screw so that essentially the screw will go through that way and that will go there, but I don't think that's enough room to grip. That's my opinion, so I'm sticking with the brass at the moment, but I've got to get sanding because it's pretty rough. I want to keep that knot. I like that knot. Looks like a car. Vroom, vroom, vroom. One of the ladies that runs the men's shed in Balcatta suggested that when we get our sandpaper, which is more or less A4 size, to cut it in quarters, because then when you go to grab something in order to get your sanding done, you don't want to have torn edges, because you know that you're either going to put it on a sanding block like so, or you're going to fold it for smaller ones. You know, a simple thing like that has saved me a lot of angst. I'm really grateful for all these little tips that I get going to the Balcatta men's shed. Well, it's going through the hole and it gets to the lock position, and I'll thump that in when I've finished it. I've still got to do some finishing work. So that's going to fit nicely, and then I will put my leather sleeve, and then this brass piece will go over that, and then I will use washers and butterfly nuts. So I'll just put the camera down and do that myself. Alright, I've put rubber on there just to keep it together while I slip it on here. Maybe I should go that way. Yep, I'll go that way. Hopefully this will fit over it and jam down there so that the cap screw is jammed inside the brass tube. It's a bit of a fit, but I want it like that. Right, pushing together, and then I'll put my washers on. All brass fittings, and an old butterfly nut from 1960s. Now, let's see if this thing actually works. Now I'm up to the 600. This one's made by Gator. Very good. It's a wet sand primer and paint, and I just like how it gets it smooth. I often just stop here at 600. Put it in the water, and then I'll get to sanding. Well, watching me sand is like watching paint dry, so I'll do this and come back. Well, here's an update. I've done up to 1200, but the wet and dry, which is a black one, has left a bluish stain on it. I haven't had that before, but that's probably because I've done hardwood and haven't noticed it. So I'm not happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of my leather spirit dye and cover the whole thing, because I don't like that at all.